Alright guys, I promised that I'll be doing a testing video for Hoshiumi, so here it is. Now, I have to say this was a very painful video. This is probably the most effort I have ever put into a video, because I spent about 5 or 6 hours today just recording about, I think I've done 240 different runs, testing different rotations and positioning, because one of the things that I've been told is there's a thing called a block angle or spike angle in this game. So I kind of want to take this opportunity to test that as well. Now, like I said, I spent 5 or 6 hours doing all of the testing. So as a result, in this video, the one that you're watching right now, I'm just going to show you guys the conclusion and kind of the summary of all of the things I'm meant to find out. I will also post a separate video, which is just a full record of the 240 runs that I've done. Obviously, it's a super long video, so I'm going to put it on like times 4 speed just so that I can actually even upload it quickly. But yeah, that's just gonna be for the very try hard. To be honest, like I don't even think there's any benefit of watching that because it's literally just 240 runs in a row without any commentary. I'm just literally doing the stage and then restarting it, etc., over and over again. So that's just more for record keeping, and in case you guys also want to, I don't know, use that for some other insights that you want to draw out. But the main conclusion is all going to be in this video, okay? Now, what exactly was I testing? So I was testing for 3 different things. Number one is that I already created a guide video on Hoshiumi where I believe he's best suited as a blocker. So I was testing his blocking capability. So that's number one. Then number 2 and number 3 was that I was having a discussion with a JP player, and he said that he has a theory that he has seen a lot. He also tried that as himself as well, which is that he believed there's a spike angle and also a block angle in this game. And even though Hoshiumi sounds good on paper, when he actually put it into practice, one of the reasons he doesn't recommend Hoshiumi at 0 dupe is because he thinks he has very bad block angle and also spike angle, etc. So the number 2 and number 3 things I wanted to test today was whether a block angle or spike angle even exists in this game. Okay, now how did I do all of my tests? So basically the way I've done it is I want to repeat a stage over and over again, and the best way of doing this is obviously going to be in the practice match because I don't have to worry about stamina, I don't have to worry about anything else like that. Okay, now I'm only going to take the very first 10 and the very first action for each run, and that's kind of why in my other video where I have the record of all of my testing, etc., you will see I literally just get one block or one spike and then restart the match. The reason for this is that you guys probably already know a lot of the actions in this game, especially towards the end of the match, is going to be scripted in the sense that this game, for some weird reason, try to make the game as close as possible. So you might be going into like a 4-0 up or like a 4-1 up, and then the game try to force into like a 4-all before you then win the 5-4. So that's kind of why as you go longer into the match, I feel like there's going to be more scripted actions, and I really don't want that to interfere with my testing. And also, obviously, certain effects they're going to build up, and a lot of times it's going to be harder for me to actually isolate the impact of individual things, right? Because if I, for example, I do the second or third spike into a game, the rotation would be different each time depending on how the previous points went. The stamina could be slightly different, etc. as well. So that's kind of why it's not going to be very easy for you to compare actions once you're like 2 or 3 turns in. So that's kind of why I'm only going to do all of the testing based on just the very first rally in each of the matches. The one I have picked for my testing is going to be the one for Abajosai, purely because they are going to use Iwazuyumi to spike first. That's probably the most meta one out of all the choices available, and probably also have the strongest spike. So that's kind of why I feel like it's going to be the best use of actually testing the blocking capability of Hoshiumi. Okay, now in terms of how do I actually test Hoshiumi, basically I don't have it right now, but I'll show you my box. But basically I purposely kept Hoshiumi only at level 40 and also only 4-star, and also without the training skill unlocked. The reason for this is that I'm actually comparing him to Lief, who I also have only at 4-star, level 40 without the training skill, and obviously I don't want to put resources to level him up any further, and that's kind of why I also cap Hoshiumi at also only just level 40. Now obviously this is not going to be super realistic. Ideally I would want to get both of them at level 60 or level 80 to test them, right? But the thing is, to be honest, the higher I raise the level, the more it's going to go into the advantage of Hoshiumi, because Hoshiumi actually have a higher natural block stat. If you actually take a look at its main block stat, it's a 597. If you actually take a look at Lief, it's only 556. Okay, so if you actually level up even further, it's actually going to swing even more into Hoshiumi's advantage. So if I'm already able to establish that Hoshiumi is better at blocking, even when both characters are 4-star and also without training skill. By the way, this training skill actually help Hoshiumi's block as well, whereas the Lief's one training skill doesn't even help with his own blocking. This just debuff the enemy's block, okay? So that's kind of why if I can already establish advantage for Hoshiumi at this low level, then that gap is going to get even higher once we actually get him to, level 80, 6-star, etc. Now, why am I comparing him to Lief? The reason why I'm comparing him to Lief is that if you just think about this in practically, now Hoshiumi, even though he has a block skill, we know the block multiplier is not going to be as strong as a mid blocker's ultimate skill, right? So vast majority of the time, if your mid blocker does have his ultimate ready, you'll be using that ultimate skill. However, the choice of whether you want to use Hoshiumi as a blocker is going to be more than whether his blocking skill is going to be better than another mid blocker's basic block. Now, basic block only have a multiplier of 100, whereas the block skill has a multiplier of 105. So basically, I'm using Lia's blocking skill as a proxy for another mid blocker's normal block, okay? So that's kind of why I'm doing the comparison between the two of them. So that's basically how I have done everything. And also, I have already changed up my potential, but if you do check out my other video, which I'll pin in the comment section, you will see that I have used the same potential on both Lief and also on Hoshiumi when I was doing the testing. And also for completeness of the test, I purposely made my team power to be at 97k for both of the scenarios, well, around 97k for both type of scenarios, just to make sure that I don't get any advantage from just a higher team rating. And also for completeness and also for testing whether there's a blocking angle, I have repeated Hoshiumi for all three of the blocking position up front, so both on the left, in the middle, and also on the right hand side, and same thing for Lief as well. And for every single one of them, I have done this 40 times. So that's kind of why I have done 40 times 2, 80, because it's 2 people, and each one of them, they are rotating across 3 different positions, okay? So that's why I've done 240 tests in a row in order to bring you all of this insight. Now, before I just show you the conclusion I'm able to draw from the blocking, I just want to show you guys the conclusion I'm going to tell you guys now for the spiking angle as well. So personally, I can't find any evidence at all that there's a thing called spiking angle. The reason is quite simple. From what I've seen so far, I have done 240 times on Abigail's side, and from the way I am hitting into the enemy, every single time I spike, it always ends up going to him, okay? What's his name? Let me just quickly check his name. Every single time I spike, it goes into him. Okay, so every single time it goes into Hanamaki, and Hanamaki is positioned in the middle. So it doesn't matter which spike I was using. In fact, I actually tried 3 different spikes. I tried Iwazuyumi, I tried Tanaka, I also tried Hoshiumi. And it doesn't matter whether I was positioned on the front row, on the left hand side, middle, or at the back. All of them always go into the receive of Hanamaki, and Hanamaki is always positioned in the middle, okay? So no matter which position I'm in, I'll always hit into that middle spot, and also no matter what spike I'm using. And the same thing for those 240 runs, Iwazuyumi is always the one spiking. Now, this will actually change depending on the rotation I have, but what I realized is that I always go into the character with the strongest receiving skill. With the strongest receiving skill. So basically, I actually have my subsetting for this one liberal to swap out opposite hitter. So when I have my Yushijima at the back, what's going to happen is that the enemy spike always go into my Yamagata, because Yamagata replaced Yushijima. It always go into Yamagata. Out of all of the testing I've done, it always go to Yamagata if Yamagata is on the back row. If my Yushijima is in the front row, so therefore Yamagata is not actually at the back row, the one with the receiving skill is going to be Enoshita. Doesn't matter where Enoshita's position, whether it's in the middle or on the right, always going to Enoshita. Okay, so that's kind of why I don't actually believe there's anything such as spike angle in this game, at least for the very first 10. It just seems to go into whoever have the strongest receiving skill. Now, whether that would actually change as the match go on, for example, maybe your stamina gets lowered, you don't have receiving skill, then maybe there could be some other RNG element. That I don't know, because I didn't actually go that far into testing that. But as far as I can see, as long as there's a receiving skill on one of your opponent's lineup, and it will just go into that person with the strongest receiving skill, okay? And that is for the stage against Abajosa. I have actually also tested versus Nekama, once again with 3 different spikers in 3 different positions up front. It always goes into Yaku, okay? It doesn't matter which position I'm hitting from, which spike I'm using, always end up hitting into Yaku. And Yaku is positioned, I think, on the right-hand side, so always going to the right hand side no matter who I'm using to spike it. And same thing for this stage and also for this stage. It always hit into the right hand side. I can't remember the name of the character in those cases, but it always going to the right hand side. Whereas for Abajota, it always going to the middle because that's where this person with the receiving skills position. Okay. And also, like I said, I can also see it the other way around. When the enemy actually spark into me, it always go into the person with the highest receiving skill. So that's kind of why personally I don't find any evidence of spiking angle, at least not when a receiving skill is available. Like I said, I can't really interfere or draw the conclusion when there are no receiving skills available. But when there's a receiving skill, I basically just can't see any evidence of spiking angle at all. Okay. Now let me show you the summary I've done through all of my testing. So first of all, I will show you the testing I've done. So basically for every single one of them, depending on the position of my character, so Korai or Lief, what I've done is I've done it 40 times. I have tracked what is the enemy spike, whether it's a bad, whether it's a normal, whether it's, well, it won't be a perfect because my surf is always perfect. So the best they can do in terms of spike is only going to be bad or normal. But then I have tracked whether the block is a normal, perfect, or bad. And then if that actually then goes into a receive, whether that's a normal, perfect, or bad. And then if it goes into a spike, and likewise if it then goes into the enemy's court, whether the enemy block with the receive is going to be a perfect block or bad as well. Okay. So basically I've been tracking this for all of the different positions and rotations for the 2 characters. So this is basically the summary I've been able to draw. So Liev has a block stat of 2025. Korai has a block stat of 1976. Obviously, the multiplier for Korai's attacks is higher, and also he does have a debuff. So that's kind of why, if you actually do the full damage calculation, you will realize Korai does have a stronger block than Liev. Now, I have written here basically when the enemy spike is bad or normal, what's going to be the number of occurrences or the frequency, what I have done a bad, normal, or perfect block. And then once again, I have sorted by whether my blocker is on the left hand side, middle, or the right hand side. Okay. Now, one thing I did notice is that the mid blocker, even if you position him on the left hand side or on the right hand side, as soon as the match starts, he would actually just automatically move towards the middle. Okay. So it feels like if we actually go for animation, the mid blocker is always going to be in the middle. And what that basically means is that if your Korai or your wind spike is on the left hand side or on the middle, he will stay on the left hand side because the mid blocker will have to be in the middle. So even if you position Korai in the middle, he would actually end up on the left hand side. Whereas if it's on the right hand side, then he will stay on the right hand side. Okay, so that's basically what it is. Now I will show you off the results later on. But the first thing I want to also draw the conclusion on is whether there's actually a thing called blocking angle, because that's once again something people said Hoshiumi is very bad at. He has a bad spiking angle, which first of all I don't think there's a spiking angle. But then the second thing they also mentioned is that he also has a bad blocking angle. So he doesn't actually do as well a block comparison to other characters. Now, is that true or not? Basically, I actually done a statistical test here. It has been a long time since I've done this. So if you are a bit of a math buff, then do correct me if I have done anything wrong. But what I've done is I've done a chi-square test for dependency, which is basically saying that depending on the position of my blocker, would that have a dependency? Or would the 2 be dependent on each other? Or have a correlation, right? That's probably the right word. Would they have a correlation with whether there's a bad or normal or perfect? So if there is actually going to be a correlation, what's going to happen is that I will end up with a very low p-value, which is basically the final score I'm trying to calculate. So if the final value is less than 0.05, then that basically means there's a statistical relationship between the 2 variables. The variable here being the position of the blocker and also the action I'm able to get, whether it's a bad, normal, or perfect. The way you want to do a chi-square test, I won't go into too much detail. If you're really interested, you can just look up on Wikipedia or something. But basically, this is the number of frequencies that you're able to do. And then what you want to do is you want to do an expected frequency, which is basically calculated by the proportion out of this total times by the proportion out of this total. Okay, so this is basically the expected frequency, and the idea of this chi-square test is basically comparing the observed frequency versus the expected frequency. Excel already have a formula for this. It's just chi-square.test. And basically, like I said, if this is lower than 0.05, then there will be a statistical significance between the two, and then we can say they're actually related. As you can see here, both numbers are massive, okay? They are a lot higher than 0.05. So even though I'll have to say this is actually a pretty small sample size, the first sample for DF is only 60 runs. The second one is only 59. However, it doesn't really matter because, oh, also, by the way, I am only doing this for when the enemy spike is normal. Because the reason why I'm only doing it for when the enemy spike is normal is because if the enemy spike is not actually normal, very likely if the spike is bad, then you are going to win that point. If the spike is perfect, you are going to lose that point. So that's kind of why I actually feel like there's the biggest swing when it's actually a normal spike. So that's kind of why I have only done this for the normal spikes. But yeah, anyway, this is basically the observed frequency of what happens when the enemy do a normal spike. This is the expected value, and this is for Lief, this is for Korai. Both cases, the numbers are a lot higher than the p-value, which basically means there's no evidence to suggest the two are related, okay? Like I said, has been a long time I've done this chi-square test. If I have done anything wrong here, then do let me know in the comment section. But I feel like I have done this test correctly. And if that is to be believed, then that basically means the position of the blocker has nothing to do with whether the block is going to be bad, normal, perfect. Now, bad, normal, perfect directly influence whether you're going to win the point or lose the point, etc. So that's kind of what, once again, I don't really think there's anything with called a block angle because I literally rotated into 3 different positions and there's no statistical evidence here either, okay? So that basically also disproves the blocking angle theory. So now that I know there's no such thing as blocking angle, what I can then do is I can add up all of the occurrences and see what is going to be the rate that Lief is able to perform like perfect block versus Korai doing a perfect block, etc. So this is basically the total number. So when there is a bad spike, Lief happened to get 7 bad blocks, 25 normal blocks, and 28 perfect blocks. So that basically means whenever the enemy do a bad spike, there's a 47 chance of Lief doing a perfect block. Whereas if I do the same for Korai, it's going to be slightly higher at 52%, okay? However, what is actually interesting is that Lief only have a 12% chance of doing a bad block when the enemy is doing a bad spike, whereas Korai has a 20%. So you almost feel like when the enemy is doing a bad spike, Korai doesn't do much normal. It have a slightly boosted rate in comparison to Lief to do a perfect block, so i.e. a block kill, but also just as likely have a slightly higher rate of doing a bad block, and basically that could lead to a bad point as well. So that one, to be honest, it feels like the two are a bit uneven. Yes, you could say Korai has a higher perfect rate, but also have a higher bad rate to compensate for it. However, what to me is more important is actually going to be when the spike is normal, because like I said, a lot of time when the spike is really bad, you are much more likely to win the point. And like conversely, when the enemy spike is perfect, a lot of time you're going to lose that point. So that's kind of why I actually care about the normal spikes the most, but that feels like the one where you can get the biggest swing or the biggest impact from. And if we actually take a look at the rate for the normal blocks, for the normal spike, what you then realize is that Lief has only a 25% chance of getting a perfect block and a 37% chance of getting a normal block. Whereas if we actually take a look at Korai, Korai is going to be beating him on both of the occurrences, okay? So Korai has 36% perfect block in comparison to 25% and also 42% normal block in comparison to Lief's 37%, okay? So this already shows that, in my opinion, so basically when the enemy do a bad spike, the two are about the same. However, when the enemy do a normal spike, which is probably the one that is going to be the most important one, because that gives the biggest swing, Korai is definitely performing much better than Lief's blocking skill, which is essentially a proxy for another mid blocker's normal block, okay? And once again, remember, this is only at 4-star and without the training skill unlock. If I actually unlock the training skill and also get a character to 6-star, the fact that Korai is a UR character is going to actually end up with even more stats than other mid blockers. And that's kind of what I do feel like Korai is, my original theory is correct. Korai is going to be outperforming all of the other mid blockers normal block. And that's kind of what's, to me, the biggest value of Hoshiumi Korai, okay? So that's basically all of the testing I've done just to show that Korai's blocking build is definitely a valid build, and that's why, also you can see from numbers here, it does seem to be much better than another mid blocker's normal block. So you would definitely be able to utilize this in practice as well. Now this is all going going to be the only testing I'll be doing. I was originally thinking whether to do a spiking testing as well. That's kind of why I also kept off the spikes. But then I realized that in order for me to get enough, because I'll get a lot of block kills already, in order for me to actually test the spike rate, I probably need to spend like 10 hours, 20 hours on this. And yeah, I'm just not going to do that. So that's kind of why I'm not actually going to do a comparison on the spikes. I will do a video in the future in terms of the build guide for Hoshiumi, and in that one I will do run some numbers for both spiking and also blocking to find out what's the optimal build. However, I'm not going to do any real testing for it, so that is just going to be theoretical based on like number calculation to see which combination of skills or potential is going to give you the highest damage output. But I'm not going to do, I'm not going to go insane like today where I spent 6 hours trying 240 different times. Okay, that is just too much effort. So unfortunately, that's going to be the only testing I'm going to do. Okay.